When Himura was 9 years old, his hometown was attacked by a giant tortoise. Whenever he told this story, he made sure to emphasize the giant part. Tortoises don't seem frightening until you're leaning out of your window, staring up at the craggy face of a reptile the size of a mountain. Trees grew from the back of its shell. Its head was covered in moss. Its claws, eating up the ground at an alarming speed, were stained with mud and the remains of animals it had trampled beneath its feet. Roads buckled. The earth shook. Those who went fast enough to escape were crushed beneath its body. Himura remembered the way his fingers gripped the windowsill as the tortoise barreled through the village. He remembered staring up at its wrinkled face, as monstrous as the living earth. Beneath the layers of soil covering its shell, he could still see the yellowing folds of its body. Paper. The tortoise was made of paper, a perfect construction of crimp folds and reverse pleats, so beautiful Himura could only stare at it in wonder, even as it thundered towards his house. The tortoise's foot swung over the roof of his home, but the snap of wooden beams and the crash of a collapsing ceiling never came. He could not remember the exact order of what happened next, only the sound and the heat. A whistle screamed above him as something struck the tortoise's back, exploding into flames that licked up the creature's body faster than wildfire. When Himura looked up again, dark ships filled the sky. Rearing its head back in agony, the tortoise burned, and the ground moved beneath Himura's feet, jolting him out of his memories. The ship's deck bobbed like a boat on the open sea. Turbines hummed, propellers churned through the warm summer air. The lights of the capital city twinkled across the ground below, but the night was fading fast, and the first strings of dawn were about to sound. It had been a long time since Himura had thought about his hometown, or the shikigami that had been burned down by hunters, a fiery end befitting a paper beast. No normal person would cry over the death of a shikigami, especially not one as masterless and mad as the tortoise had been. Yet Himura had felt something like grief as he had watched it burn. It had been such a waste. "Are you still here?" An annoyed voice drew Himura's attention away from his thoughts. He turned to find the airship's navigator clambering out of the ship's hatch and onto the deck. As she pulled herself up, Himura noticed that the rings beneath her eyes had grown darker. Both her hair and her kimono were in disarray, one a tangle of knots, the other a wrinkled mess. Sleep did not come easy when one had an entire airship to keep on course. Himura took a paper square from his pocket and balanced it on the tip of his finger. "I was thinking, Sayo." Without touching it, the piece of paper folded itself into an origami crane. "About a shikigami I met when I was younger. Even though it destroyed my home, it was such a magnificent beast. I wish it had lived." He flicked the crane into the air and caught it, crushing it in his fist. When he opened his palm, the origami bird was in pieces. With a puff of breath, he scattered the scraps into the air. They billowed over the deck like petals of snow. Sayo snorted. "You only say that because you're a crafter. Most normal folk would be glad to see a shikigami burn." With a flick of his fingers, Himura made the scraps of paper dance around his feet. Crafter. People had spat that word at him as though it were a curse. Others had whispered it in terror. But when Sayo said the word crafter, It was with the scorn of someone who knew Himura and was deeply unimpressed by him. Speaking of crafters, Say's gaze swept across the dawning sky. You should get going. You'll need to arrive at the Midori by sunrise. According to the captain's informant, the girl should be serving breakfast in the main banquet hall. Come back with her, or don't come back at all.